Hello and welcome to another special edition of I've Never Read Discworld with me, PJ Hart, who has read a significant amount of Discworld, and
Me, Andy Luke, who hasn't read, well, has read about half of the Discworld almost. So I'm getting there.
he's getting there. Yeah, so since we're hanging around that halfway point, hopefully regular listeners will know that we're basically kind of kicking our heels a little bit at the moment so that we can do Hogfather at Christmas. So in the meantime, we're looking at some short stories. We are looking at Troll Bridge this month, which also has the kind of exciting extra feature of having a short film adaptation. So we're going to chat about both of those together, and we've got a little bit of a surprise guest joining us remotely as well. So before we get into all that exciting stuff, let's get some details about the story itself from Andy.
I came to Trowbridge through a blink of the screen, which contains all of Terry's Discworld shorts and a bunch of other really fascinating short fiction pieces as well. It was first published in a J.R.R. Tolkien dedicated anthology that was called After the King, published in New York, 1991. And it's a little 15-page short. It sits right between, somewhere between moving pictures and small gods. Messaged PG to tell him I got it from the first paragraph. And I'm just going to read that out now
Go for it.
because it's such a perfect setup. The wind blew off the mountains, filling the air with fine ice crystals. It was too cold to snow. In weather like this, wolves came down into villages. Trees in the heart of the forest exploded when they froze. And you kind of know who it's going to be just by that very brief sort of environmental descript, right?
I think so. Yeah, it's conjures up such a vivid mental image, and it's the exact mental image as you imply that feels like the perfect home for our old friend Cohen the barbarian. You know, you can just see him there in his loincloth and the snow in his beard and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a killer. It's a killer intro. I wonder, for Terry, is it, being in this Tolkien anthology, is that like making him think he needs to kick his world building up a notch here? He needs to, compete with the master himself. And I think he's certainly he's given it a really good bash.
There's a
Uh,
little note that comes with uh, at the front of this short story that he's talking about. We can't really sort of bring his territory into any attempt to trespass in Middle Earth. Didn't seem a good idea. Um,
mm.
but he's talking about themes in Tolkien, which we wait for our spin-off. I've never read Tolkien.
Doing
But
him in the wrong order. You know that, right?
things change, things pass, right, Terry? You fight a war to change the world, and it changes into a world with no place in it for you, the fighter. Those who fight for the bright future are not always by nature well fitted to live it. Sawmills oust the spiders from the dark wood, the endless plains are fenced. Um, and like, is that a Tolkien themed thing? It seems to be the way it's framed here.
Yeah, I would say that it feels like Terry doing that thing that he quite often does, where he takes a concept to its logical conclusion, like kind of past where the story would naturally end. So, yeah, so there's loads of big epic battles in Tolkien, and the world changes and moves at the behest of these big characters. But then I guess what Terry's asking that Tolkien doesn't necessarily address is then what happens? Like, you have all these amazing warriors who've done all these incredible feats, but like, once the incredible feats have been completed and the world is safe, then what happens? I guess which is kind of the extra question that Terry's asking that Tolkien maybe doesn't ask. I mean, I'm not a Tolkien completist. I haven't read everything. Maybe he does somewhere, but this is certainly Terry's take on that. And I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that in interesting times we maybe get a bit of a feel of this as well in terms of the barbarians and like them trying to settle down into society and stuff. But this has kind of a different tone to it, a different feel. And I wonder why that is. I wonder, is it because Cohen's on his own? It feels a bit more melancholy or something, a bit more lonely. I know he's got a talking horse, which is awesome.
And essentially, it's just, although you do have these ancillary characters, the barrel, the horse, it's essentially a two-hander. It's two characters talking. That's kind of at the heart and center of the story. Cohen and Michael the Troll, whose bridge he wants to cross. And it's got so much in that. I mean, this notion of what happens after the big battles. Somebody goes for a walk, or somebody pops outside for a cigarette and has a chat. There's kind of, there's that very much quiet epilogue or even interlude to the essence.
Yeah, yeah, and that's interesting. I think the fact that it feels like this could be a way to kind of retire Cohen, and I think if you were reading it for the first time, or if you were reading it as it was published, you might get that sense from it, right up until the end, certainly, that the world has changed too much for Cohen, and this is his swan song or whatever. And I mean, Cohen himself sets that up, like he's getting old. He's going to fight a troll before the end, before his ability to even attempt that runs out, and he's probably measuring that time now in months, if not weeks. So yeah, in that sense, like even though it starts bleak with that really great opening paragraph, it's very introspective. The fact that it kind of ends on an upswing though, of Cohen kind of refinding a bit of a spark, deciding to kind of rail against that world and go and fight the merchant and the troll who owns the lumber yard, the guy who cut down the forest, is kind of nice.
Oh,
It's
I
like,
didn't read that into it at all. That's interesting that you did.
I mean,
There's definitely kindness that comes out. I love
yeah.
that element of it.
So did you listen to the song that is over the end credits of the film?
We will get to that, but yes,
Yeah.
the one there's a wonderful piece. Is it in there?
Well, it's made very explicit in there, but that's essentially fan fiction. But the last line of the short story is, I think Cohen exchanges his 12 pieces of gold or whatever for three addresses, and the addresses are then implied to be the addresses of the three brothers-in-laws who,
Wow. So this three addresses was sometimes Terry doesn't quite hit everything with me. I don't quite get, but this three addresses was the only one. And so that explains it. The song is actually called What Cohen Did Next. It's written and sung by Martin Pearson, completely original work. Um,
I was a lot of fun, I have to say. But yeah, but that's where it takes its cue from. It is from that last line, I guess. So the fact that Cohen has decided that he does still have fight left in him, and who he wants to fight are the people who are making the world boring and flat and spiderless and all the things that he despises.
So to come back to Cohen fighting a troll, which he's never done before. I took a different tack on this, and it was well, surely he's fought trolls, like he's a great hero of many years.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too.
The point must be then that he has never fought one on one. And from all that we know or imagine about Cohen, he will have no bother taking on a troll. It's sort of a walk in the park.
Yeah,
So I think going on this journey is kind of like it's a little bit of an indulgence for him. It's there's something like he must know he can easily kick any troll's ass or the average troll. Um,
Yeah, I mean, certainly
He
going into
doesn't
the
need to
story.
prove himself to himself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I would agree with that based on everything we know about Cohen up to this point. I think like putting him in this really desolate place and kind of giving him this monologue, well, it's a dialogue with the horse really, but essentially about how he thinks he's past it and the fact that he is on his own, he doesn't have his horde with him or anything, does sort of make me think maybe Cohen is starting to think that he's past it. You know, maybe this is meant to be a kind of transitional moment for that character. But the issue with that is that I think you've identified is that like he's always been that way. He's always been too old, but yet he always succeeds. And like I don't think enough has materially changed here for us to really believe that he's not going to be able to defeat a troll in one-on-one combat. But that almost doesn't matter anyway because when he gets to the bridge, he doesn't end up fighting the troll, and the story's about something else, so that's fine, maybe, right?
Right. So you get this wonderfully comic rug pull that also and this is the troll's family and hero worship that is also quite substantial beyond being a joke. It sets the groundwork for all the social and class issues that come out through the short story. It's a very working class kind of piece. Cohen and the troll Micah just really talking about stuff that kind of matters to them through the years.
Yeah, and a lot of I didn't know this because just to point out something I usually point out at the start, but I haven't mentioned yet, is that I hadn't read this. I hadn't really read any of the short stories. So yeah, reading this for the first time, it felt like a really early, quite full-bodied examination of something that Terry comes back to a lot more often and a lot with a lot more kind of depth later in the series, which is that the Discworld is changing from this like Tolkien-esque fantasy world into like an industrial revolution era fantasy world, which was not. I mean, I know it's a relatively common trope now, and we see a lot more steampunk in popular culture and stuff like that now. But 80s and 90s, that was still very much the realms of subgenre, I guess. So for Terry Pratchett, who was at the time the UK's largest selling living author, I think, you know, so for him to be taking a look at that and in a way that really addresses working class issues and issues of class and other social issues head on, I think is really important. And it's interesting to sort of see, to me, what feels like the origin of that in this short story. So that's been quite illuminating.
Yeah, it slots quite well within that sort of fantasy genre that we maybe sort of uh, was maybe a bit of a drag in sort of some of the very earliest books, but it does go beyond that. It's transportive.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I
moving.
think he
It's got
exactly.
that age, but it's also got other
Yeah,
ages within it.
yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, it's fair to say that he's been moving away from that straight fantasy satire after like the first couple of books. But what's interesting to me about this is that he kind of addresses that head on. He's like, yes, the world of Cohen used to be this. It used to be forests full of dark spiders. No, used to be dark forests full of spiders, or maybe the spiders are dark too. It would probably make sense if they were. It was trolls under bridges. It was fighting, you know, big fantasy battles where everybody fought for a king and stuff like that. And this is just him marking the moment that actually that world has changed.
Right. Now it's spruce. Spruce.
Us, yeah.
Yeah, special tree time here. I
I didn't
didn't
even think of
prepare
that.
any facts on spruce or forests with spiders. So if you would like to add
You
us
waited
on
so long. You waited so
Twitter or
long.
Facebook or anywhere else, there's a tree time graphic now on screen. Send us your spruce and spider forest facts, please.
I think it's fair because the whole point of the spruce in the story is that it's like boring tree, isn't it? It's like, oh, that tree's no fun. So that's why we don't have any. tree time for spruce. It doesn't deserve it.
Yeah, that doesn't. We
It's
fell asleep.
it's
We
beneath
didn't
us.
even consider it.
Yeah. And so what about Micah's perspective? Because Micah's domestic situation is hilarious. It's like
You
it's
know,
the
there was a somewhere. Oh no, this is an interesting thread, and I don't want to make too much of it. In fact, I don't want to make too much of the story at all. But Micah's relationship with his wife Beryl, and Beryl is giving off about Cohen not quite being this towering figure, and it very much reminded me of the conversation parents have with children, or some parents, about becoming an artist or taking up one of those ludicrous jobs, like podcasting.
yeah, fair, very fair.
It's not paying the bills. It, am I supposed to be impressed by this comic book you've made? Hi, mom and dad, by the way. Yeah, did you get that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely a very valid reading of it. I think that dynamic can absolutely extend into uh, other familiar relationships. Like, I think, if you are married to somebody and your kind of aspirations don't align, or at least if you're not aware that your aspirations don't align and you're not okay with that, then this is the kind of relationship that you end up in. Um, and then if you bring kids into that as well, then and this is I now this is me projecting, and then you start thinking about things like what kind of example are you setting for your kids and stuff like that. So I think yeah, there's a lot of like heavy-ish kind of family dynamics that you could read into it, but I do think sitting above that, closer to the surface, is just the fact that like the naggy wife and especially like the in-laws is just like old school British sitcom humor.
Hmm.
That dynamic of the dysfunctional married couple and then the slightly larger family unit as a force of antagonism is and the way that it is, it all feels like it's played sort of slightly stereotypical. Feels to me, and I don't have a specific example, but it feels to me like a 70s or 80s British sitcom, maybe, that kind of vibe.
I think, yeah, framing it, because I started to think when we're talking about the realistic relationship, that must be a very unhappy marriage. And the notion that all the in-laws are doing better than Micah, and Micah's just holding on in there, and is being constantly reminded that he's um, he may be a failure. Yeah, it's a pretty grim reading of this. But yeah, like I can see the sitcom potential in that. You could have a
Yeah,
sort of various readings of this setup.
yeah. I wish I had a specific example to lean on, but even something like Faulty Towers. I mean, think about Death Bridge as Faulty Towers. Where like he's Basil Faulty and he won't let it go. The place is doing really bad. It's falling down around him. The wife knows that he's crap at it, but like is still there in his ear nagging him. I don't know. Maybe that's the only vaguely relevant example I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's better ones. If you can think of any, do let us know. But but that saves it from being too dark. I think it has a bit of that kind of back and forth banter between them that you would expect from like a classic British sitcom.
It does have a bit of that Peter David or maybe even J. Michael Straczynski quality. I think one of the first lines exchanged between the two protagonists is, oh, when we get Micah recognizes Cohen, and he is his first recognition. It's quite clear that there's some hero worship going on, and Cohen's like, oh no, no. That settles down quite nicely into this old men with old notes, and lots of familiar ground between them.
Yeah, it's interesting how that dynamic shifts. How even because it's like first they're going to be antagonists, they're going to fight. Cohen's going to kick his ass or whatever. But then it turns out, yeah, he's a fan, so there's like there's a power imbalance there. There's a different dynamic all of a sudden, but then they sort of settle down into it, and they both are dissatisfied with the world, and then all of a sudden they're peers, and they're just kind of sitting there having a smoke and a chat. So that is a lot of change in a relationship in a story this short, but because each of those scenarios, maybe with the exception of like the opening one where I mean I've never wanted to fight a troll, but but I've met some of my heroes, and and I've found common ground with people I never thought I would find common ground with. So I think the rest of it's all really relatable, and that's what makes it work. Maybe I should add that to my bucket list. Seemed to work out okay for Cohen, didn't it?
And you're right, you say it gives us a window into Discworld on how it has changed of late. Um, well, we've got the whole spiel about farmers and fences going up everywhere and forest raised and yeah, this sort of I guess when this move towards this capitalist or more capitalist society where everything is being changed in the environment.
Yeah, it's that industrial.
Free land is now starting to be portioned up and um, plans dealt on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that industrial revolution thing, I guess, that we were chatting about before. But the fact that there, and most of the trolls and stuff that we've met and dwarves, well, maybe not so much dwarves, but certainly most of the trolls that we've met in the series thus far have kind of been city trolls. We've met them mostly in like Moorpork, and they're doing not necessarily stereotypical trollish things. So this is like a slightly unusual window in that sense, where the assumptions that we had about trolls we've actually never faced them. Like this is actually what a fantasy troll or a fairy tale troll is supposed to do. He's meant to hide under a bridge and he's
Right.
meant to jump out. So
There's
yeah,
this
maybe.
one of Cohen giving off about there being more trolls in the city than there are in the mountains. That's not.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
Micah says one
there's
of the brother-in-laws is getting kind of fat and stuff. Like he's not fighting fit for a troll either. Yeah.
you've also got the little line about the silicon brains, which reminded me that trolls are essentially computers with the potential to move very, very slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, you can tell it's one of his favorite concepts. It's one of mine as well. It gets used as a plot device a couple of times. Uh, and that's what I just mean about Terry always kind of taking the thought to its natural conclusion. So like I'm sure there's trolls in any number of fantasy series, but like how often has somebody thought it the whole way through that if they're silicon-based life forms and we have silicon-based computers and silicon-based computers work faster when they're cold, then surely the trolls in their brains also must work faster when they're. I mean, I just love that's the thought progression. So yeah, any time it comes up, it makes me smile for sure. And I don't know. I don't think we should belabor this. So I wonder, do you agree with the thesis of this short story? Do you agree that the world has become too small, it has become too portioned up, that there is no place for people like Cohen and Micah, and that there should be a place for people like Cohen and Micah? It's a big question.
Do you know every generation gets this, every generation feels this way. And I think it's probably fair for our generation to feel that based upon the level of changes, like when yeah, the internet wasn't really a thing until I was 25. So
Mhm.
that's quite a massive kind of leap. Um, and what I really respect about this short is just how gentle Terry goes on the things aren't the same as they were when I was young.
Yeah, yeah, because that is a trope, but it's one that every generation can viscerally relate to. But yeah, but it's an easy one to hammer too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and yeah, that's part of his great gift. I think is tackling big tropes, but in a way that feels like it is bringing something new to the conversation. Uh,
The
yeah,
other notion I had was this idea of the warrior who changes society, and then can they be in this society that they've changed? Because I've been watching Firefly and Serenity recently,
Mm,
and thinking as well about the issues that we have with the war here in Northern Ireland, terrorists and policemen, and very active and aggressively changing this, and then not being able to fit into this changed world so well.
yeah. Yeah, well, interestingly, I have a close family member who is a psychologist, and that was the subject of their doctoral research was into how people who are active combatants in the Troubles, how they deal with their trauma in a place, they have to live in a place where that trauma took place, and how that affects them differently from, say, people who went away to fight a war and then came back. So yeah, I had a similar thought that like there was a sort of quite particular resonance maybe for this place as well out of that. It maybe makes it slightly darker maybe than
Yeah.
it was intended to be as well. But
It's a question I don't think there's any really easy answers on.
no,
I'm
for sure.
not
And
a smart guy. I know my psychology, I know my conflict and survivor narratives and stuff, but
mm,
it's a
there's one thing that
hard
I'm
one to
not,
take a stand on
yeah,
yourself
but
on.
one thing in the story that I thought was interesting on that front was the kind of the assumption, by Cohen that Micah had fought in a war, and now he had this sort of business just doing his bridge thing. And I was just sort of thinking how for Terry's generation, like the generation before them, that would have been a fairly default assumption that like regardless of what you did in life in the 1970s, if you were a grown adult over the age of 40, there was a better than not chance that you had fought in at least one war. And like how all those people, that sort of greatest generation or whatever, how they assimilated back into civilian life and how they watched the world change. I think there's maybe slight tinges of that color in this story as well.
There's also questions like, Cohen brings it up wonderfully in one of his last lines to Micah about, you know, he's talking about was there wizards, there was a king involved.
Mm.
I can't remember his name. I don't think I ever met him. And also wondering like, did they fight in the same war? Were they on opposite sides? We know very little about the history of. Well, I know very little about the history of Discworld and wars at this point.
Yeah,
Sorcery is the only one that I can clearly remember.
yeah. I don't think it's
I
much of a
don't even think
spoiler.
it's a reference to that.
No, I don't think it's much of a spoiler either to say that it's intentionally vague, you know. And yeah, I'll not say any more than that because it's something that comes up again, specifically around wars that involve trolls. So yeah, I won't say any more. But I would say if you feel that it's vague, that's fine. I'm fairly certain it's intentionally vague. So um, yeah, so that all got a bit heavy, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I have to say, it did feel a little heavier maybe than some Discworld. I thought the tone was slightly different, but in like a pleasing way. I think like for a writer like Terry, who's got such a specific style, like the temptation to just write a Discworld story but shorter, like that would have been serviceable and fine. The fact that he's sort of taken the opportunity to play a bit with his style and the medium of short stories and stuff like that, I think is really elevates this, makes it stronger. And I'd be interested to know if that did come from the occasion of being included in a Tolkien anthology. But successful, 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, lovely piece. It has so much in it that I didn't realize until we have unpacked it here. And it's quite light, almost. And this isn't a quality reference, almost disposable little piece. That's no reflection on the quality of it, but it kind of passes like a river. We are now going to talk about Snowgun Films, a fan outlet who made a fan fiction adaptation of Trollbridge. And I think that I'm trying to remember the year 2016, was it? Or
Well, it's a tricky one to answer because I think there's been a few. They were working on it for a long time, and there's been a few iterations.
We will
The
come back and answer that question in just a minute. We're now going to cut to a piece of video footage with my friend Arsalan Haider Ali, who was my house guest for a while, and we decided to take in viewing Trollbridge together. So this is largely Arsalan's thoughts immediately after we had finished watching that. And I should probably say, if you want to go and check out Trollbridge, a film for yourself, it's available for free on YouTube, and there's a link in the description. So, Arsalan, first impressions.
My goodness, I was, when you said that this is a fan-made film, I've seen a few on YouTube. Comparing the production quality of those films to Trollbridge, my goodness, Trollbridge is literally leaps and bounds ahead of some of the other fan-made films online.
I think when that came up, we both kind of I think our jaws both dropped at the production quality of it. You've never actually read any Discworld or seen any, so this is a first time introduction to you. Cohen is like a sort of a semi-regular character. What did you make of Cohen and the portrayal of?
So the actor did an outstanding job. Obviously battle scarred. He's probably seen better days in his youth, and travel weary as well. You can see that he doesn't eat all that much because he's quite a skinny warrior, and he's been on the road for quite some time because his clothes and his equipment are quite worn out.
I noticed you had a good few laughs, and I think that's one of my favorite pieces about Pratchett's writing. Is he's a great humorist.
I mean, the some of the humor in the dialogue was really funny. The banter between Cohen and Micah, the troll, really funny. I mean, to say the least. The way Micah's missus has go at him, saying I thought you'd fix the bridge. That was hilarious. And
Were you surprised to see Micah's wife and child show up?
Yeah, I thought a character like that and his profession, basically being a thug and taxing people for crossing the bridge, he wouldn't have a family, but he did. And his missus didn't clearly approve of his profession because she didn't want their son to follow in the father's footsteps. I mean, she couldn't stand the sight of that situation, which is why she and her son left.
I thought it really nailed it as a story. It's quite a lovely little short, but the film just opened it up for me. It kind of blew me away, honestly.
It just goes to show how far technology has come, and if somebody with with a good script, a good storyline, a relatively good grasp of cinematography and visual effects can do a stellar job on a limited budget. And if an idea is pitched to an audience and they agree to crowdfund it, then the future of filmmaking is limitless. I mean, I think 10-15 years from now, when technology becomes even more accessible, you'll have high quality productions like this.
The crowdfunder credits rolled quite a bit, and we were laughing as we came on because it was accompanied by quite a funny epic ballad about Cohen.
Yes, we had a few good laughs about that, and I had an entire scenes running through my head as I was hearing what was being said in the lyrics of the ballad. Very funny. Whoever wrote this is a genius, so shout out to him.
Would you do you think, having watched that, would you be more inclined now than before to either check out some of Terry Pratchett's Discworld or an adaptation of that? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the guy's a genius when it comes to storytelling, no doubt about it.
Oh, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Maybe we'll get you hooked on some. Thanks very
Yes.
much, Arslan.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so you heard there, Arslan might well pick up some Pratchett, so I gave him my copy of Guards on his way to enjoy. So thank you for doing that for us, Arslan.
Yeah, that was cool. And good choice as well, Andy, on the kind of intro book. The opinions are out there on where you should start. Guards is always my recommendation. So if you've learned anything from me over the course of this, I'm glad that that's one of them. So yeah, so Troll Bridge, the film. I was not expecting this to be 30 minutes long. I'm just gonna put that out there. But anybody who knows me and anybody who's had the misfortune of being script edited by me, especially, will know that for me, like a short film, 10, 12 minutes, that's where you should be at. But actually, I was fine with it. I was like, am I going to be able to sit through this whole half an hour? Especially because I'm already very familiar with the story. But actually, I enjoyed every minute of it, I have to say.
It does. It loves you watching it. It really
Yeah.
does. So this came out in November 2019, out of some serious crowdfunding. I would just go through some of the credits. Don Bridges as Cohen, who in my mind, like I can't really see anybody else as Cohen. He epitomizes that character so well. I know that's how Cohen looks visually in other media, but just is perfect. Glenn Van Oostrom as a horse, John Jenkins as Mika, Tilly Legg playing Beryl and the narrator, and it comes from the director producer team of Daniel Knight and Aaron Morris. And it's worth mentioning the cinematography by Tim Egan.
Absolutely, and very much worth mentioning the visual effects work done by the Foundry and I think a few other smaller studios as well, because I mean, this is a big ask for a crowdfunded film in terms of like what's required. A talking horse, a fantasy bridge, like not one but three trolls. So full character animation as well there. So yeah, extremely impressed by the production value across the board. That's my area of research to a degree in terms of my doctoral research. So there's things I could certainly nitpick all day long in terms of how some of the visual effects impact the narrative in various ways. But like to do this as a crowdfunder and to get it to the point where it is, I think it's an incredible achievement that needs to be acknowledged for sure. But yeah,
It's next level. It has a Game of Thrones sort of largeness to it.
the bridge itself, I have to say, it in a funny way, when I read the story, and you got this kind of feeling that like Micah's bridge is kind of run down and a bit kind of crap.
Yeah,
I
felt the
didn't
same way.
I didn't picture it on as grand a scale as they've put it in the short film, but the fact that it's huge in the short, like it's this gigantic bridge with like two towers on it, it's still crumbling. It's still on its last legs, this bridge. So it's like got that kind of decaying grandeur, which I thought was a really good choice. And there may have been cues for that in the story that I just missed, but I was certainly picturing it quite differently. But I think
Yeah,
they did a
I
better
kind of
job.
felt it was quite the same. I pictured it as a sort of a rundown little small Scottish or Irish bridge out in the country somewhere, and this is
Yeah,
big, epic sort of Game of Thrones scale bridge.
yeah.
And
But thinking about the genre that we're in, especially the in terms of television and film, like we're in Cohen the Barbarian world, we're in Conan the Barbarian
yeah,
world. It has to be like this, otherwise, why make the film? You know?
well, it certainly works with that sort of opening landscape, which honestly I had to Google. I think it's Melbourne it was shot and part of in the studio. Um, but it looks like some kind of Icelandic, just enormous vista. It's just so lushly incredible. It,
Yeah, the location. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about how the the studio work and the VFX work was good, but yeah, they did a really good job with the location shoot as well, which is the horse, Conan with the horse kind of going by this desolate river kind of scene, and it's all nice and desaturated. I mean, I guess one good thing about Australia is that you don't have to go very far to find a lot of nothing.
Yeah.
Do you know? So, I mean, it was probably the sun was probably split in the sky that day, but a bit of color grading, a bit of kind of creative framing and stuff like that goes a long way, and I think they did a really, really good job on it. It
Right.
doesn't fit.
You can really feel how cold Cohen is in that landscape.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. Speaking of bringing it back to Don Bridges, absolutely incredible performance. I thought.
Yeah.
I'm looking. I've been scrolling his IMDb. I mean, he's obviously been working hard for many, many years. I'm sort of was kind of surprised that I didn't recognize him from anything else. He's he's in Romper Stomper, which I definitely have seen, but I mean that is a 32-year-old film now. So obviously quite prolific on the Australian scene. Doesn't seem to have particularly broken through, but I mean deserves to for sure. It sort of seems like the
Has
kind.
while being like fulfilling the geriatric quota, has a very sort of young punk kind of energy to him as well. You can see that.
Yeah,
Right.
Romper Stomper energy coming through. um,
With
but
that.
yeah, no, really impressed, and especially those kind of heavier scenes that we talked about when we were talking about the story, that kind of melancholy, that kind of ennui almost that Cohen, like you never really, Cohen's not the depressed type, but he's definitely on the cusp of it a couple of times in this story, and he sort of the ebb and flow of it is really well captured in the performance. And I have to say they've done well. I didn't catch it. I'm sure it's here somewhere on IMDb, but the costume and makeup design also deserves a shout out because I mean Cohen he's just stepped off the cover of one of the books in this, hasn't he? I mean he looks perfect. Like, and those big beards, I know from sort of being adjacent to these departments on set and stuff, like those big beards are not easy to do and not easy to make look convincing. And the fact that he's totally comfortable being pretty much naked the whole way through it as well. I
Yeah.
think,
His
you know,
Arctic landscape.
yeah.
I noticed there was like something caught in his beard. It looked like a bumblebee or something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was gonna be really picky about it, I would have liked a bit more of that, a bit more of it like maybe being kind of matted and dreadlocked and like he hasn't showered or bathed for a while because that's something that comes up a lot in the books. But like it doesn't look like it's just been taken out of the packet though, like because that's how they look fake. It doesn't look brand new either. They've obviously made an effort to make it feel like real hair and to look like real hair. I think like, if I was being really nitpicky, I would have wanted to push that a little bit further. But I know there's big challenges when it comes to that sort of thing. And this is a film production. I hesitate to call it amateur because it's not amateur.
It's not.
But
Really
for a crowdfunded project, they had challenges on every single front, so it feels unfair to nitpick about things like hair and makeup.
I find it to be a totally professional quality. There's no reason why that shouldn't be televised or sent run this theater.
Completely agreed. Yeah, the
I had a few problems with Micah, hearing Micah first time around, but I just rewatched it before this podcast, and I think it must have just been my television because it sounded fine off the laptop.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. I had no issues with the sound recording. I thought maybe the slight compromise was made because there's obviously quite an extended conversation between these two characters has to happen on the bridge, and at times I felt like it didn't feel like it was kind of outside on a valley. I felt there maybe should have been a bit more wind, or maybe should have been a bit of echo potentially, um, but also keenly aware that anything you would have added to that would have made the dialogue harder to understand. So
Right.
there's a compromise there as well.
And you do have to have that sort of consistency in audio visual. The bridge, bring that up again. I think was probably my biggest issue actually, but also like in a kind of a I don't really mind sort of way. When you have the bridge starts to fall apart at the towards the end after Cohen hits it a bit too hard. I think that's possibly the most significant narrative um, uh, tangent
Yeah.
that you have on it. It does make the story feel a bit different. It reinforces some elements of it because it becomes that Cohen is giving him the money um, to maybe look after the bridge a bit more, put more of a
Mm.
focus on that element of it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an it's also a bit of an unnecessary drama beat.
I wouldn't say it's unnecessary, but again, this is like my pet obsession, and it's kind of part of the focus of my doctoral research as well, is how things like that change the tone of a story. So on the page, we Micah tells us a lot that the bridge is falling down around him, and that's significant motivator for his kind of character arc through the story. So that's fine in a piece of prose. But for that to feel significant in a visual narrative, we have to show and not just tell. Otherwise, it won't land for the audience. So we do have to see the bridge fall apart to some extent. I think for that part of Micah's kind of character arc to be fulfilled, I don't know if it needed to be as big and dramatic as it was, but I do sort of feel like if you're going to build a big asset like that bridge, like they worked hard on that big bridge, like why would you not? I guess, you know.
So you need like a consistent. You don't so much need a big epic sort of struck part of the bridge falling apart and in one go. You can have that, but what's more important is to build up to that. Maybe a few bricks coming off here and there.
Yeah, well, we do when
Right.
Micah when Micah's climbing up the bridge in the first instance, we do see little bits falling off and stuff like that. So I don't feel like it comes totally out of nowhere. I mean, I'm not like I don't think you're wrong. Like it did take me by surprise. I was like, oh wow, shit, that they went there. But then reflected on it, I was like, well, yeah, because you can't just tell backstory in a film. You have if you're not showing, then you're not storytelling essentially. So so I understand why that decision was made, and I also kind of understand that if once that decision is made, why you go big with it because you've built all these assets, you've done all this work, and you have the ability to do something that's quite visually arresting. So I don't see why you wouldn't. Especially if your audience haven't read. I get it. Like there's going to be the vast majority of the people watching this will have read the story or will at least be familiar
Yeah.
with the world and stuff. But I mean, as we sort of discussed, you know, it's not a big visually dramatic story in the Discworld sense. It really is just two people talking on a bridge. So the filmmaker will always, the natural instinct of any filmmaker is to always kind of introduce a bit of spectacle, I guess, you know. Kind of, and hence, I don't know, I didn't watch the version that has the battle scene in it, did you? But I've seen clips of it.
Right.
So yeah, so again, that's an element that's not in the story at all. You know, the battle that Cohen is reminiscing about. There's a version of the film that opens with that, and there's some clips of it in the trailer that's on IMDb, and that's that exact same thing. You know, you show, not you don't just tell. So the fact that they spend quite an important part of the last act of this film talking about this war, uh, we should ideally see some of that war, and I know there's a version of the film that includes that scene. So again, I can kind of understand the reasoning behind that. And I mean, that's hard to do. Like, you couldn't ask for a bigger challenge for a short film to have like a battle scene, three fully animated trolls, a fully animated set in the bridge, have a talking horse. I haven't even talked about the talking horse. Because the guy, he ever did that voice, Glenn Van Oostrum,
Yeah.
whoever he may be, there he is. I thought he was great. Really, really good. I'm just looking at his IMDb now to see if he's cropped up in anything more international, but nothing that I recognize. But there's a thing about that in Discworld, isn't there, where you have talking horses, talking swords, uh, and it's always funny on the page because they're talking Terry's voice. so bringing that to life, any of those kind of things to life, is quite a big responsibility because they always carry a lot of the humor in any of those stories. And I think Glenn really nailed it actually. And the animation, the horse mouth animation, which wasn't always perfect, actually kind of added to it a little bit. It made it
Yeah,
funnier, I
there's
thought.
it really works through simplicity. There's yeah, there's a lot being brought to life in this film. It really does what a good adaptation should, and it got me thinking more about the issues of class and labor and age, and I'm just enjoying the scenery of it and the interactions.
Yeah, for sure. I think having the the two characters, listening to all that dialogue, because it's a dialogue heavy piece for sure, but just being able to listen to it all performed in two distinctly working class accents, I think adds a lot to that, even though one of them is an old man with a gigantic beard, naked, and the other one is a fully animated troll. Like, it doesn't take anything away from that at all, but having those two, I mean, real genuinely impressive performances, because I don't think either of those accents would be those guys' natural accent. So there's been a conscious decision there to perform those parts in two different working class British accents. I think that really elevates it. Yeah, all those elements that you're talking about.
It really does pay off the anticipation and wondering, well, how are they going to do Cohen when he's half naked? Most of the time, well, here's Cohen and he's half naked.
I just literally picture perfect. Like, yeah, I was so impressed. There's a few other bits and pieces, and I've been nitpicked a few technical things, but there was a few technical things that I was actually really impressed by as well. And one of those is when they're just hanging out on the bridge, the kind of 15-16 minute mark, which is where they just kind of settle into the conversation. They realize they're not going to fight. They're just going to have a smoke and a chat. And Micah just puts his elbows up on the side of the bridge, and the snow moves. And that's all obviously fully animated, and snow is really hard to do. And there's, I think, performance capture probably involved in Micah's movements. So the fact that the snow reacts naturally, so he puts his arm on the snow, and then when he moves his arm, the snow moves with him. He makes a dent in the snow. Just like little things like that just make you think, oh yeah, this is real. Where I'm hanging out with a troll and a barbarian on a bridge because the snow is moving. You can see a bit of the wind. Cohen feels cold. Like, all the elements just really fit really well together. So despite the fact that they set themselves a gigantic technical challenge, like, to get even half of where they got to would have been an achievement, but they've absolutely knocked it out of the park. And I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating.
There was some consideration which project piece they were going to adapt, and I think one of the witches full-length stories come up, or the sea and the fishes also came up. And I'm surprised, honestly, that they went for Trollbridge and that it turned out the way it did, from a very simple 15-page bare basic story into this 30-minute, at times, let's be honest, kind of epic looking piece.
Mm.
There's a really, we were talking about, there's a 3 hour behind the scenes.
It's 4 hours, I think.
4 hours?
I
Yeah,
think
it
it's
probably
four
is.
hours.
I
Yeah.
watched the first hour of it, and actually, it's fascinating. It's a really interesting piece about the filmmaker's narrative, and looking around for location shootings. Well, from the point of what inspired them to do this in the first place, and how they reached the decision to choose which piece, and it's, yeah, it's really great in terms of a narrative of the filmmaker's journey.
Yeah. I
I would
did.
really recommend you go and watch some of this.
Yeah, I dipped into the last one a little bit. But I must go back and watch some of the earlier ones. I have to say that, yeah, with my own sort of producer hat on, I can see the appeal of this, despite the technical challenges of trolls and all the rest of it. The fact that it's got a minimal cast and more or less a single location, Like those are the things you're kind of looking for if you're producing a short film. Uh, for the most, first and foremost, the fact that one of the characters is a troll is obviously a challenge. Figure out if you can meet that challenge, and then if you raise more money than you need to film that single location, then absolutely go out, take your horse out to the river, do a battle scene. Why not? But at the end of the day, you can still tell that story without those things. Do you know what I mean? You can still tell the story completely set on the bridge. So yeah, for me, it does naturally feel like a good choice for this kind of project. I would hesitate. Yeah, I would struggle maybe to pick another one off the top of my head that might work in the same way. But then I haven't read enough. Like we did the Sea and the Little Fishes, but again, there's a lot of people in that.
Right.
There's a lot of characters, like a lot of characters in that.
I think I see what you mean. If this was something that you say you only had 300 quid to do it on, you could do it with 300 quid. You could find a way.
Yeah, you would just, I don't know what you would do. You would just, Micah would just stand in the shadows the whole time, and you would do like two red eyes or something like that. Make it like a giant Jawa or something, maybe, But yeah, but you're totally right. There are, there's all different practical ways to do stuff like that. But I'm so impressed with the visual effects in this, I have to say. Yeah, it has got me thinking, like, what else? Just when you said that, I was like, what else could you do? Because I always sort of thought, that things like this kind of weren't possible. Like, Discworld, people have been saying for decades, Discworld's unfilmable, and that's proven not to be true. There's been some fairly successful Discworld adaptations, some fairly unsuccessful ones. But if you can do this, if you can do something like this through crowdfunding, then, I mean, yeah, fair enough. It took them, a decade or more to do it, but it can be done,
Yeah, about 15 years or so. And I think there's another Snowgum Films piece out there, which we'll certainly get around to and look forward to doing that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm clicking through their YouTube channel now. Awesome. Yeah, I've got to say, we'll definitely keep an eye on these guys. Because yeah, I think that sort of collaboration, there's so many things that you need to get right in a film like this, and the temptation to skimp on any of them when you're crowdfunding and you don't have maybe executive producers to answer to, or broadcasters or deadlines to kind of pull punches when it comes to things like casting and visual effects and editing. I think is too easy. But one thing that came out of that behind the scenes stuff that I did watch is their just complete respect for the source material, and I think that's what sort of held them back from cutting any corners, from making sure that they did it right, especially after Terry passed, was that there's this really tangible sense that they were doing it for him, and yeah, you can just tell that it's all love. Yeah, so much love went into this, like, and it really shows. I would love to see more. I have to say, I would absolutely love to see more Dawn Bridges as Cohen the Barbarian in anything, because think how many options there are, think how many stories there are where he could crop up, and he would just be so good.
Yeah, that's a nice thought. Maybe we'll get a follow-up from Dawn someday.
But that's the issue, isn't it? All the other Cohen stories are so mental and so massive. Like, you can't, like, nobody's going to turn around into Interesting Times, really, are they? Or even like The Light Fantastic, which doesn't make sense without The Color of Magic. And I know they've been adapted already, but like, it already feels like, well, I mean, who's to say? I know Narrativia have the rights back to the whole series, and I know that there's development stuff potentially going on behind the scenes there. So who knows what the next Discworld adaptation might be, and who might crop up in it. But I feel bad, actually, because it occurs to me that who played Cohen the Barbarian in that adaptation?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not saying that they sucked, but it's certainly not as memorable.
Yeah. David Bradley.
Oh yeah,
You
I
should
mean,
know that one.
that's unfair. I just got to take my foot right out of my mouth now, because David Bradley was excellent in that as well.
I remember you went off on a rant about, do you not know who David Bradley is?
Yeah, and then I completely forgot about him. I mean, yeah, we might have to cut this because I've embarrassed myself now.
Good choice. David Bradley versus Dawn Bridges. We're not gonna go there.
Yeah, I mean, David Bradley was the more comedic performance. actually, which is fair because that was sort of it's a more comedic subject matter. Cohen's got a lot funnier stuff to do, so yeah, it's different strengths for different source material, I guess, to try to claw this back. But I mean, I don't think. Well, I'd be interested to know what the age difference between them is. I feel like David Bradley's been an old man in everything I've seen him in, going back 20 years. So, whereas I'm not quite as familiar with Don Bridges' work, so
So we're coming up to the hour mark, so probably leave it there.
I think so.
And
What an enjoyable little kind of run through. Yeah, a really good short story. Absolutely incredible adaptation from a kind of short film point of view. Never seen anything like it. Yeah, what a load of fun that was. Get back to the full length stuff next month then.
let us know what you thought of Trowbridge short or film or both. But would really love to hear you in the conversation. Thanks,
Absolutely.
man.
I'll talk at length about visual effects, about visual narrative, about adaptations, about Discworld. These are all my favorite conversation topics, which probably scared everybody off now. But absolutely, if you're interested in any of those things. Also interested to hear people's opinions on the Don Bridges versus David Bradley
Oh yeah.
Cohen debate. Well, inadvertent debate that I didn't realize we were starting. But there we go. Lots to think about, and do stick with us for Hogfather for Christmas next month. We're going to try and do something kind of special for that, which maybe we won't reveal just yet, just in case it doesn't come off.
We've got a plan now, so
Indeed, we do.
we don't want to let you down,
No.
and we won't. We'll try not to.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug my new novel. I don't know if this was on screen last time. It's called Coastlines After Dark. It's kind of sits in the middle ground of sort of Baywatch Nights, X-Files, Garth Marenghi. It's in a kind of a script format with it's essentially it's about coast guards, a coast guard who might not be David Hasselhoff, or might, who has a private investigative agency who looks into the Fortean and the Eldritch. It's got a introduction by Alison Pregler of Movie Nights. So if you haven't seen her stuff, absolutely do check out. She's absolute queen. And covered by my dear friend Sean Duffield, the multi-talented one, with all manner of weird stuff. And that's available at most online bookshops and quite a number of physical ones too.
The hard copy looks very, very handsome. The cover is really popping. I love that. That's class. I'll just quickly plug Country Rogues on BBC iPlayer. If you search for comedy shorts, it comes up as episode 2 of that series. Or if you search for Country Rogues, that's rogues, like Rogue Trader, it should come up as well. 6-minute short about two cousins, one with Down syndrome, trying to start a country band in Belfast in the present day. So, why wouldn't you? Lots of fun to be had there. Maybe a little bit of special effects. Nothing on the level of Trowbridge, and certainly not as long either. It's only a 6-minute watch. So if you're in the UK and you can access the BBC iPlayer, do check that out.
We are on Facebook for a little while. We're on Twitter. We're not sure if that's going to continue.
We keep saying that, but we don't do anything about it.
I don't know. I'm kind of at the end of my sort of rope. I'm
Yeah,
deciding
likewise.
that 2025, my personal account will not be continuing to publish live stuff on Twitter. So I don't know what, as I'm mainly doing the Discord GNU stuff. I don't know. I haven't made a decision on that, but
Yeah, very fair. Very
so
fair,
it
very
might
fair.
mean set up on Mastodon or Threads or Bluesky.
Yeah,
So we'll see. But meantime, have a wee chat with us on there.
absolutely. So yeah, hopefully that was some fun. Get reading Hogfather if you want to join us for the kind of Hogfather Christmas special. Should hopefully be able to put out around Christmas. So if you're looking for something to read between now and then, do join us for that one. So until then,
Thank you. I have read some more Discworld.
as have I.
Hey,
Bye.
see you next month.